Okay, so you're interested in the world of newspaper editing. Buckle up, because it's a wild ride. We're diving into RoleCatcher's resources on this, and let me tell you, this isn't your grandma's newsroom anymore.
It really is a whole new world, isn't it?
It is, although knowing my grandma, she was probably way ahead of her time.
She sounds like she knew what was up.
Hmm.
And you're right, this field is changing faster than a headline ticker. In fact, one of the first things that jumped out at me from these roll catcher guides is the state of the industry itself. It's no secret that newspapers have faced some tough times.
Yeah, declining industry definitely caught my eye too. Not exactly the most encouraging phrase, right?
It's the truth, though.
So before we even get into the nitty-gritty of being an editor, let's talk about why this role even matters in today's world. Why should someone even consider this career path?
That's the million-dollar question.
Hmm.
And it's easy to get bogged down in the doom and gloom. But here's the thing. The need for quality journalism, for stories that matter, hasn't gone anywhere. If anything, it's even more vital now.
Especially in a world drowning in clickbait and misinformation. So it's less about the medium, less about print versus digital, and more about the mission.
Exactly. It's about being a guardian of truth, of holding those in power accountable. And that's where newspaper editors come in. They're not just gatekeepers deciding what gets printed anymore. They're architects of understanding, shaping how we make sense of the world.
Okay, I'm hooked already. But let's get practical. What does a newspaper editor actually do? I mean, I have visions of someone hunched over a mountain of papers wielding a red pen like a sword.
Well, there might be less red ink these days, but that image of shaping and crafting the news is spot on. RoleCatcher's Career Guide really digs into this. It emphasizes how editors determine not just what stories run, but their length, placement, which reporter is best suited. It's strategic storytelling on a whole other level.
So it's less about being a grammar guru and more about being a master strategist.
Exactly. Imagine you're putting together a puzzle. Each article, each image, even the captions, they all contribute to the bigger picture you're creating for the reader.
That's such a great analogy. So how does the whole digital shift play into this? Are we talking websites, social media? Is TikTok the new front page?
Well, maybe not TikTok yet, but you're right. It's not just about the printed word anymore. Newspapers have had to adapt, and fast. RoleCatcher highlights how many have transitioned to online platforms, digital subscriptions, and using social media in really innovative ways.
It's like that old saying, adapt or die, but in this case, it's adapt or become irrelevant, right?
Exactly. And that takes a specific skill set. We often think of editors as wordsmiths, but these days you need to be a tech-savvy multitasker, comfortable with data analysis, SEO optimization.
Wait, hold on. SEO optimization, that sounds more Silicon Valley than newsroom.
And that's the point. The lines are blurring. RoleCatcher talks about how editors are using tools to track what readers are clicking on, what's resonating, what's falling flat. It's about understanding the science behind the story.
Okay, mind officially blown. So, we've got a declining industry, a massive digital shift. You're not exactly painting a rosy picture here. What's the upside? What are the pros of diving into this world?
You're right, it's not for the faint of heart. But for those who thrive on challenge and making a real-world impact, that's where things get exciting. Remember how we talked about being guardians of truth? There's a real sense of purpose in that.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So, less about fame and fortune, more about being a force for good.
Exactly. RoleCatcher uses the words creative and influential when describing the role. You're not just reporting the news, you're shaping the narrative, sparking conversations, maybe even changing minds. That's powerful stuff.
I have to admit, the idea of shaping the narrative, having that kind of influence, it's a bit daunting.
Right.
It makes me think about the whole fake news problem. How do you, as an editor, make sure you're putting out accurate information, especially in this fast-paced digital world?
It's a huge responsibility. And you've hit on one of the biggest challenges facing journalists today. RoleCatcher actually dedicates a section in their guide to ethics and fact-checking.
Oh, good. Because if you're shaping the narrative, that narrative better be accurate?
Exactly. It's not enough to just be fast anymore. You have to be right. And that means rigorous fact-checking, vetting your sources, being transparent about any uncertainties.
It's like being a detective, but for information. You need to have a nose for a good story, but also a healthy dose of skepticism.
And a willingness to admit when you're wrong. That's a big one. RoleCatcher actually highlights active learning as a key skill. It's not just about what you know, but how you adapt when new information comes to light, how you learn from your mistakes.
That makes a lot of sense, especially in a field that's constantly evolving. You need to be comfortable with the unknown, with saying, I don't know, but I'll find out.
Precisely. And sometimes that finding out involves sifting through mountains of data, which is where those AI tools we talked about can really come in handy. Imagine being able to analyze thousands of sources, cross-reference information, identify potential biases.
Okay, so back to those robots. Are you telling me they're doing the fact-checking now?
Not quite, but they can be incredibly powerful assistants. Think of it this way. Say you're working on a story about climate change. An AI tool could scan through years of scientific data, news reports, even social media posts to give you a comprehensive overview of the issue.
So it's like having a research assistant who can process information at warp speed.
Exactly.
That would free up a lot of time for the more human aspects of editing, like crafting compelling headlines or working with writers to refine their stories.
Precisely. It allows editors to be more strategic, more focused on the big picture, and less bogged down by the more tedious aspects of the job.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal, but let's talk about the human side of things a bit more. RoleCatcher also mentioned social perceptiveness as a key skill. What do they mean by that?
Ah, yes. This one really resonated with me. It's easy to get caught up in the technical aspects, but at its core, this is a people business. Editors work closely with writers, photographers, designers. It's about building relationships, fostering collaboration, creating a shared vision.
So it's not just about managing words on a page, it's about managing people, understanding their strengths, motivating them to do their best work.
Precisely. And that takes emotional intelligence, the ability to navigate different personalities, to give constructive feedback, to create a supportive and inspiring work environment.
I can see why that would be crucial, especially in a high-pressure environment like a newsroom. And speaking of pressure, let's talk about career progression. RoleCatcher's Guide lays out a pretty detailed path from junior reporter all the way up to executive editor.
It's a fascinating roadmap, isn't it? And it shows how those skills we've been talking about, the strategic thinking, the tech savviness, the people management, how those become even more important as you move up the ranks.
Okay, so let's break it down. We'll start with that first rung on the ladder, the junior reporter. RoleCatcher describes this role as eager to contribute and having a strong portfolio of work.
It's about paying your dues, learning the ropes from the ground up. You're conducting interviews, fact-checking, maybe even grabbing coffee for the senior reporters.
Sounds like a lot of grunt work, but also invaluable experience.
Absolutely. And it's a chance to hone your craft, to figure out what kind of journalist you want to be. Are you drawn to hard-hitting investigative pieces? Do you have a knack for human interest stories? This is where you start to find your voice.
And build up that all-important portfolio. So what comes next? Senior reporter.
You got it. Now you're starting to take on more responsibility, maybe leading a team of junior reporters, digging into more complex stories, developing your own network of sources.
The example profile mentions having a knack for uncovering newsworthy stories and a passion for staying updated on emerging trends.
It's not just about reporting the news anymore. It's about anticipating it, spotting those under-the-radar stories that might have a big impact down the line. And it's about understanding the bigger picture, how different events connect, how trends emerge.
So it's less about chasing ambulances and more about connecting the dots, seeing the forest for the trees.
Exactly. And that's a skill that becomes even more crucial as you move into. Well, let's save that for the next part, shall
Oh,
we?
you're good. Keeping me on the edge of my seat. All right, listeners, we're taking a quick break, but we'll be back soon to delve deeper into the world of newspaper editing. Don't touch that dial. Yay! And we are back with part 3 of our deep dive into the wild world of newspaper editing.
The plot thickens, right?
It does. Okay, so last time we left off with a bit of a cliffhanger.
We did.
We were climbing the ladder in the world of newspaper editing.
Right.
And I am ready to hear about the next level.
Right. We left off at the exciting part where you really start to shape the news. Moving on from senior reporter, we have the news editor. This is where you transition from chasing the story to deciding what stories even get chased in the first place.
Talk about a power move, but also a lot of pressure.
Absolutely. RoleCatcher's Guide paints a picture of someone with a keen eye for newsworthy stories, who is also adept at managing deadlines and coordinating teams. So not only are you deciding what matters, you're making sure it gets done on time and in the right way.
That makes me think about those constant deadlines listed as a con in the RoleCatcher Guide. It sounds like things move at lightning speed in a newsroom.
Oh, you can say that again. And the digital age has only amplified that pressure.
Yeah.
But I think what separates a good news editor from a great one is their ability to not just manage the chaos, but to actually thrive in it.
So a bit of a pressure cooker, but for those who can handle the heat, it sounds like a pretty exhilarating kitchen to be in.
Exactly. And if you can handle that heat, the next logical step up the ladder is managing editor. This is where you go from being a chef to, I don't know, a culinary institute director.
I love that analogy. So you're not just cooking the dishes anymore, you're setting the entire menu, training the next generation of chefs.
Precisely. You're overseeing the editorial vision of the entire publication. RoleCatcher mentions driving readership and engagement, which in today's world means understanding analytics, social media trends. It's a balancing act between journalistic integrity and knowing what resonates with your audience.
Speaking of resonance, we've talked a lot about the technical skills and the strategic thinking needed, but what about the human side? RoleCatcher emphasizes social perceptiveness, and at this level, it seems like that would be crucial.
Oh, absolutely. As managing editor, you're not just managing words, you're managing people. You're mentoring and guiding an entire team of editors, writers, and reporters. You're fostering their talents, helping them grow, and creating an environment where everyone feels valued and heard.
It sounds like a huge responsibility, but also incredibly rewarding. So what does the view look like from the very top? What does it take to become the executive editor, the captain of this journalistic ship?
Well, according to RoleCatcher, you've got to have a track record of driving innovation and growth while also leveraging cutting-edge tools and
So
platforms.
you're not just steering the ship, you're constantly upgrading it, making sure it can weather any storm.
Exactly. And you're doing all of this while upholding the highest journalistic standards, navigating complex ethical dilemmas. It's a position that demands a unique blend of leadership, vision, and unwavering integrity.
Wow, I'm exhausted just thinking about it. But seriously, this has been eye-opening. We've gone from wielding red pens to shaping narratives, from chasing deadlines to managing entire teams.
And we've only just scratched the surface. What really struck me from these RoleCatcher resources is how much this field is changing, how it's constantly evolving.
It's almost like the definition of newspaper editor is being rewritten in real time. So for someone listening who's thinking, this sounds amazing, but also a little overwhelming, what would you say?
I'd say embrace the unknown, that willingness to learn, to adapt, to be challenged. That's what sets great journalists apart. And who knows, maybe you'll be the one writing the next chapter in the evolution of news.
Now that's an inspiring thought. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of newspaper editing, I have to ask, what surprised you the most?
Honestly, it was the emphasis on the human element. Yes, the technology is important, the data analysis, the SEO optimization. But at its core, this is a profession driven by passion, by a deep-seated belief in the power of storytelling to inform, to inspire, to make a difference.
And that's a story worth telling no matter what the medium. So to everyone listening out there, whether you're a seasoned journalist or just starting to explore the world of news, remember this: your voice matters, your story matters, and the truth matters.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the evolving world of newspaper editing. Thanks for joining us. We hope you learned something new about what it takes to succeed in this dynamic field and maybe even found a little inspiration along the way.